Welcome to the Release Show. I'm your host, Brittany Scariest. On today's show, we have Serena Pergola. Serena possesses a degree in nursing and is a recent alumni of the University of Michigan. She is famous for several things, but mostly for being the author of The Silver Lining, the intersection of sexual abuse and anxiety through world of gymnastics. Ultimately, Serena shares her story globally with the hopes of inspiring others to be more vocal about their experiences and to build a community that's geared towards support and empowerment. Let's welcome Serena.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. It's such an honor to be here today. I'm excited.
Yay, thanks for accepting the invite to be on the show.
Of course.
Before we talk about your book and your history in gymnastics, I like to know what motivated you to become a nursing student at the University of Michigan.
So actually, I graduated the University of Michigan last May with a degree in sales and marketing and writing. And then I started working for a little while, about 6 months, and then I had published my book within that time. And that's what actually brought me to realize that my calling, I just wasn't totally following my calling and staying true to who I was. So I decided to switch careers. So now I am back in school. I'm actually at LIU Brooklyn here in New York because I do live in New York. So I'm back home now. And I am pursuing an accelerated nursing degree there. So I will be all graduated up in just 16 months, which is super quick. But I'm looking forward to it. So yeah.
Well, congrats. That is amazing.
Yes.
Nursing is a big dream for most women, with over 91% of nurses being females. However, instead of picking that career, you chose to become a competitive gymnast. Why is that?
Yeah, I just fell in love with gymnastics at a very young age. I was 3 when I started gymnastics. So it was basically all I knew for almost 15 years, which was crazy to think about now. It definitely shaped me into who I am today. And I'm so grateful for my gymnastics career. I think it taught me a lot of the values that I hold very close to my heart now. And in writing my book about my whole journey in my life, I just really realized that I wasn't really staying true to who I was in my heart. And that's what made me decide that I really wanted to go back to school and pursue this nursing degree, because I just feel like I was put here to empower others, to help and to heal. And I feel like I can do that through being a nurse. So that is what I am in the process of making happen now.
Great. Becoming good enough to compete in any sport involves a lot of effort and self-discipline. Can you share with us some of the most challenging parts of being a competitive gymnast?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that one that still kind of rings true today is perfectionism. Gymnastics is one of those sports that if you're not always striving to be perfect, then it feels like you're always falling short, which definitely is not true, but that's what it is ingrained in you from such a young age. And now I think back, because it has been a number of years since I've been a gymnast, I realized that like the amount of talent and the amount of just like strong will it took to be a gymnast, and like how incredible the sport truly is. And now we can appreciate that and kind of like look back and be like, wow, like that's something I was able to do and be really proud of it. When you're a gymnast, I think it's hard to sometimes step back and appreciate really what you're doing to a holistic, from a holistic perspective, because you're so far in it and you are always just striving for the next goal instead of stepping back for a second and taking it all in and being like, wait, I've came from here to all the way over here. Like that's so incredible. And I can work towards the next goal, but I should also be really proud of all that I've achieved already. So I think that perfectionism definitely is a positive, and also it can unfortunately be a negative, because now in my life, especially like in a nursing degree, it's hard to always be striving for that perfect 100 when, I mean, it's sometimes just not attainable. You have to always just be striving for your personal best. It's not about striving for being better than the person next to you. It's about looking in and seeing, am I putting my best foot forward? And then that's perfect. That is your perfect. So therefore it is perfect. And it took a long time to come to that realization. But I think that I am working every day to try and remind myself of that now.
That's great. So now let's talk about your fantastic book. Can you tell us the meaning behind the title?
Yes, absolutely. So it is called The Silver Lining, the Intersection of Sexual Assault and Anxiety Through the World of Gymnastics. It goes through, kind of follows throughout my entire life. So the book is, it's broken up into 3 parts. So the first part is looking backward. And I look back at my life as a gymnast. I look back at where I've learned all the lessons and values that I hold close to my heart today and how those were established. And then I look deeper and I kind of do some self-reflection. And I think about why these things have affected me in the ways that they have. So it's a lot of thinking about, you know, those positives and negatives that gymnastics gave me and how I can leverage those to further me in my life instead of hold me back. And then also how I can take my very negative experiences of both sexual assault and domestic violence and suffering from anxiety, and I can use those things to, again, leverage the positives or the silver linings, as I like to call them, and to further me in my life instead of holding me back. And then the last part is looking forward. So it's all about, now what am I going to do looking forward in my life, and how am I going to use these things to really be who I know I want to be in my heart, who I feel I'm called to be, why I was put on this earth. So that's kind of like the whole journey throughout the book. And then, of course, you know, there's a lot of narrative telling my story. And then there is a lot of also trying to bring in my reader and make them see my story as something that, even if they weren't a gymnast, they never stepped on the gymnastics mat, how can they kind of mirror their life throughout this journey and come to the end and be like, oh, wow, these are the silver linings in my life. And this is how I'm going to further myself. So it's definitely, I wrote the book with the intentions of really building a community and inspiring others to find their silver linings, because once we start finding our silver linings, we can really start becoming who we were made to be.
That is so true. So please share with us your story behind sexual abuse.
Yeah. So my first experience with sexual assault and with domestic violence was when I was 15. I was a sophomore or junior in high school. And it was a boyfriend at the time. So we dated for about a year and a half. It was hard because I think of it now and it's, you want to say like, why did I continue putting myself through that? And you have to really think about like the real manipulation behind that person. And you can't fault yourself. So for a long time, I always felt like I was the problem. And I've since come to realize that I'm not the problem. I didn't ask for this. I didn't do anything for it to have happened. But I don't have to have it define the rest of my life. So that was my first experience with both sexual assault and domestic violence. And then fast forward, I left for the University of Michigan as a freshman. And I was assaulted by a friend. And then again, as a junior, I was assaulted by another friend. And I think that was that third time was a point in my life that felt like one of my lowest lows, but also simultaneously something that really made me kind of check in with myself and say, okay, how can I get myself out of what feels like this rut and start to let people in my life, most trusted people in my life, and tell them what I was going through? Because when I was back in high school, the first person I told was my best friend at the time, and she didn't believe me. She told me I was lying. She told me I was exaggerating. I was just being dramatic. And that's a really traumatizing thing, especially for someone who has just gone through something that is so horrible, they don't want to talk about it in the first place. And then they get up the courage to tell someone and tell them that their feelings are invalid. Their experiences are invalid. And that, I think, was the most challenging part. Was I shut down and turned inward instead of turning outward to those people who I knew I could trust and I knew would have my back. And since then, I've really, after my junior year, I was like, okay, you know what? I think I really want to let in those people that I know are going to be here for me and are going to help me come back to who I really am. And then that's kind of what led me to write the book in the first place, and then where I am today. So
That's great. So, what inspired you to write the book, though? Is there something that happened in your life specifically that said, hey, I want to write a book about this so that I can share my story? Or what event happened in your life that made you want to write a book?
Yeah, I think it started off as kind of like a therapeutic experience, like putting it all down on paper and reading it as someone else's story kind of gives you a little bit better perspective. I think what I always say is like, we're our own harshest critic, but for our best friend, we're like their number one fan. So we have to kind of start to like, of course, still be our best friend's number one fan, but also be our own number one fan. Like we don't have to be our harshest critic. And that was kind of where I was in my life, where I was like, okay, how can I start to turn this around and I just had this weight on my heart that I felt like I was not alone in this. I knew there was other people who were feeling the same way that I was. And I wanted to share that and build a community so that we could all start to walk the journey together instead of having to live in silence and be just our own harshest critic. Always constantly telling myself that I was the problem, telling myself what I had done wrong to make these things happen. And instead, I kind of flipped the switch and I said, you know what? I'm going to write this down as if it's someone else's story. And then I'm going to read it and I'm going to say, okay, if this was my best friend, what would I say to them? And that was when I started to really realize, like, I wanted to embrace these silver linings that I was telling in the story, not just focus on the negatives that were going to bring me down. And we're not going to let me live my life the way that I know I was put here to live it. So that was definitely the turning point.
So what are the most important lessons you think people will learn when they read The Silver Lining?
I think one of the most important is just like empowerment overall, empowering yourself and then also empowering those around you. And then just leading with kindness. I think those are my two main mantras. I'm always like, I always say, like, you got to lead with empowerment and kindness. And what I mean by that is really enlisting yourself to be who you feel like you're meant to be. So I keep talking about like what I feel like I'm here to do. And that's why I'm now pursuing nursing. And that's why I wrote this book. So I feel like it's hard sometimes for us to figure out what that is because it's overwhelming. There's so many things. We always think like, you know, I can't do that. I can't do that. And I always try and think, well, what if I can? And what if it's the greatest thing I ever do? So I always try, and when I'm telling myself something negative, I try and play the almost devil's advocate in a positive way and say like, well, who said I can't do that? What if I can? And what if it's the most incredible thing that I do? And that was definitely something that rung true when writing the book, because it was hard. Like, I mean, I wrote about some of the most vulnerable experiences in my life, and I put it out there for everybody in the world to read. And that was really a challenge at first. And then after the book published and just one person reached out saying like, this has touched my life in a positive way, I was like, okay, it was worth it. Like that was really what made me realize that all of this hard stuff that I had gone through and sharing it with the world even had its silver linings in that experience. And I think that since then, so many people reaching out that I know, that I've known my whole life, and I didn't know that this is what they were feeling, or that I've never met. I think that that's what kind of keeps me going, keeps me sharing, no matter how hard it is, because it's easy to just turn inward and say, okay, you know, I'm only going to share the positives, but you know, we just have positives. And if we did, we would never know the difference between the positives and the negatives. If we only had good things, we wouldn't even know it was good anymore. So bad things are okay. They're okay. And they kind of give us perspective on when we're in a good moment and we're experiencing something wonderful, we're like, wow, this is incredible. I want to stay in this moment. I want to be present right now and really lean into this like awesome feeling. And I think that that's in building like this community around my story has been one of definitely the most rewarding experiences, is just building this community.
That is great. I like that you are sharing your story because there are other people that have gone through sexual assault as well. I remember reading online, what was it? What was her name? Amy that went through the sexual assault with the doctor, with the coach that she had
Oh, yeah.
for the Olympics.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I remember reading that. And so when I read your story, I was like, wow, she went through the same thing. So, and I know it goes on in all different kinds of sports or extracurricular activities. Like, you know, I've had someone who's a pageant girl who's gone through this too. So it's not just gymnasts, it's people everywhere. And so I like that you're sharing your story and continue to do that.
Absolutely. And I think that
you have a relatively brief.
Yes, sorry, go ahead. I was just saying, I think.
No, go ahead. You go ahead.
I was just saying, I think that when that Larry Nassar story came out too, it wound up coming in at close to 500 women that came forward that he had assaulted. And that number just still to this day just absolutely blows my mind because it was just for years. I mean, this went on for years and years and years and years since I think if I'm correct, it's 1994 until 2016. So that's a really long time. And I think that what I saw in that story when that came out in 2016 was something so similar to something I had experienced in people invalidating all of those women's experiences. And some of them were young. And instead of hearing them out and believing in their story and believing in them as people, they decided to kind of turn a blind eye to it. And I think that that's one of the most heartbreaking things in that entire story is now they have to live with, you know, those feelings of self-doubt because being told that you're lying for so long is such a hard thing to overcome. And I think that that's something that why I find all of those women so incredibly inspiring, and they really helped me to also kind of give me like a light switch turned on in my head. Like, okay, it's not just me. Other people have been told that they were lying and their experiences are true and real and valid. And that means mine are too. And I think that that's something that there was kind of like also definitely added to a turning point in my life that went on in 2016 that came out. So yeah, and I was still in college and I knew you had heard of it, but you didn't know to the magnitude that it really had gone on, which was disheartening, especially in the gymnastics community. It was hard for a lot of gymnasts to really come to that realization that there was really so much negative in the sport. But again, we had to find the silver linings and continue to push on and really lean into those. And then simultaneously, how do we now start to fix the problems with the culture in the sport that allowed that to happen? And how do we now enlist the people who really want to teach these young children in a positive way and teach them how to be strong with not just gymnasts, because I think that that's a benefit of gymnastics. If you do it for such a long time, you really get an opportunity to teach a child in their formative years. But if you teach them negative things in their formative years, that's going to affect them negatively for the rest of their lives. And I think that enlist more people that are going to lean into those positives and really focus on not just their gymnastics, but them as humans, because that's really what's important. Their gymnastic skills are great and beautiful and definitely should be celebrated, but we also need to celebrate them as humans because that's the most important part.
That is 100% true. You have a relatively brief history as a victim of sexual assault and domestic violence. Can you tell us about the time of your life and how you managed to cope with it? So how did you manage to cope with the sexual abuse and the domestic violence?
Yeah, I think at first I think my first experience really coping with it was when I had gone through this long therapy process. I write about this in my book as well. And at first it was like not so great. Like I had a lot of therapists that were kind of adding to the negative instead of helping me work through to the positive. It kind of made me like not believe in that system for a little while. And then I had a friend tell me about this therapist who I've been seeing for about 3 years now. So clearly she's a good one. But when I first, yeah, so the process was long, it ended in a positive way. And I think that that's what we have to remember. Sometimes we have to keep, especially with something like therapy, it's going to be a long process because not every therapist is going to be for you. So you have to almost do work to find the right one, which stinks because you're already going through something hard and now you have to like go through this hard process to get to the good stuff. And in the moment, you're like, this isn't worth it. This isn't worth it. And I definitely had reached that point. But when this friend turned me to my current therapist, I spoke to her, and she's actually also a sexual assault survivor. And I think that was really helpful for me personally with my experiences, because we were able to almost like have this connection beyond just like knowing about it and knowledge from like learning in a textbook, but really knowledge from learned experience. And she understood the concept of not fully understanding what I'm feeling because she hadn't been through the same exact experience as me. And I think that that's something that's really important to think about when you're talking to sexual assault survivors and domestic violence survivors, or any type of abuse, really, because you don't know their experience. So it's hard to tell someone like, I understand what you're going through. I try and stray away from that as much as I possibly can, because I don't know what they're going through. And I can have them lean on me for support, and I want to be here to empower them, but I'm not going to tell them that I understand, because I didn't go through what they went through. I went through my own experience, and I can use my experience to help me to kind of empower them. But you don't want to tell them that you completely understand what they've gone through, because you never will. And that's okay. I don't think that that's a bad thing. I think it's like looked down on because you're like, oh, well, you feel like you can't be there for somebody if you don't fully understand their experience. But I think that that's absolutely not true. My friends don't fully understand my experience, and they're absolutely 150% there for me. Same thing with my mom. Like, she doesn't know exactly what I experienced. She doesn't feel what I'm feeling, but she's able to still be there for support and to empower me. And I think that that's important to think about, because it's hard to see in the moment. You're like, oh, I want to be there for them. I want to tell them I understand. But you just want to let them know that you're there for them to lean on for support and for just to be there. Like, I think that we underestimate how important it is for someone to just be there, and just be there for us to talk to when we need someone to listen, or just sit with when we just need to sit there. And that has such value. And I think I'm very lucky because I do have such incredible people in my life that are there for me in such incredible ways. And I've learned a lot more about my friends in getting vulnerable with them. And I think that that's something that we stray away from because it's hard. You're like, well, I don't want to burden. I always was like, I don't want to burden anybody. I don't want to burden anybody. But you're not. You want to be there. And that's always when people come and talk to me about their experiences, and I'm like, and they're like, oh, I'm sorry, I don't want to put this on you. I don't want you to have to worry about it. And I'm like, it's not about that. I want to be here. I want you to lean on me. I want you to be here for support and for empowerment, and to lend you that strength when you need it. So I think that that's something that's really important to remember, because it's easy to forget. It's really easy to forget. But yeah.
It is. A lot of times when you're going through things, you don't like to tell other people because you feel like you're a burden to them. They could be in their happy season of their life while you're in your sad season. And so you're bringing the negativity into their life. Well, in your mind, you think you are, and you just don't want to bring them down with your story or what you're going through. I've been in that situation too, where I just decide to hold things in because I don't want to, ruin somebody else's day. And I don't like to repeat myself, but I do catch myself doing it sometimes. It's like repetitively saying the same thing over and over, because it's therapeutic for you because you're the one going through it, but other people don't understand that. So definitely having a support system when you're going through things is very valuable, and it will help you get through those times in your life.
Absolutely. And I think that's something that it's exactly like you said, you just don't want to, like, if someone's in their good season, like, you're like, oh, I don't want to put a damper on that. But just because they're in their good season and you're not, they want to be there for you. They're still your friend, even if you're going through a bad season. Like, we totally underestimate like how much our friends really love us and really want to be there for us. And like, I have to kind of check myself sometimes. I'm like, oh, I don't want to bother them. And then I'm like, wait a second. Like, they want to hear from you. They want to know, like, when I'm going through something hard, so that they're like, okay, like, this is the time in the friendship where I give 75% and she gives 25%. And that's okay, because when I'm in my hard season, I know she's going to give 75 and I can give 25 and we can still meet in the middle. And I think that that's like so important to remember. And exactly like you said, we just forget it because we're like, oh no, they're going through a good thing. It's like, okay, but they're still your son, even if they're going through good, you're going through bad. So it's so important to remember.
Yes, it is. From your perspective, what do you think is the best course of action for people who often fall victim to sexual assault and domestic violence?
I think, which I talked a little bit about already, is just like knowing you're not the problem. Like, you didn't ask for this. You did not do anything to make this happen. That's the hardest thing to really realize when you're going through it. But it is the most important thing to remember. I write a lot about it in my book because it's something that really put a damper on my life for a very long time, because I was so stuck in believing that I was the problem. I had to have been the problem. How could this have happened 3 times if I wasn't the problem?
Mm-hmm.
No, absolutely not. Like, you are absolutely not the problem at all. You didn't ask for these things to happen. You didn't want these negative things to happen, but they did. And they don't have to, like I said, they don't have to define the rest of our lives. We get to define the rest of our lives. Mm-hmm. So how do we take the lessons that we learn from something and use them moving forward? And sometimes, like, I think we put too much pressure on those lessons because we're like, it has to be this huge life-changing lesson. No, it can be something really small, and you just do that little small thing and you move forward with it, and that's great. And that's awesome. And that's enough. It doesn't have to be this thing that completely changes the course of our life. Like, we put so much pressure on ourselves all the time. I know I still do it to this day. I'm like, oh, well, what's my lesson in this hard time? Like, okay, yeah. Like, of course we want to figure out what that lesson is, but like, if it's a little thing and you're like, oh no, that can't be important enough. That's not big enough. Yeah, it is. That's what we learned. Then great. That's great. Let's take that and let's move forward. And that's something that I actively have to choose to do every day, because, like, just because the hardest season of our life is over doesn't mean we're not going to go through another hard season.
Of course.
And we have to just embrace all of the seasons and not try and rush through to the next one. When we're experiencing something bad, we're sometimes very prone to just trying to rush to the next thing. But if we don't live out the experience that we're in right now, you're never going to really get to that next season. You're going to just kind of stay stuck in an in-between stage. So it's important to remember, like, okay, this is hard. I'm going to sit in this hard, and I'm going to try and, do what I feel like I need at this moment. Instead of trying to do what we think is going to bring us to the good, just do what you need at this moment. If it could be go for a walk, it could be sit and meditate for 5 minutes. It doesn't mean it has to be this huge event, but just do whatever your body and your mind is asking you for. Give it that, and then figure out what's next. We don't have to always rush to figure out the end game. Sometimes we have to just stay with the current and be present, like I said before. And that's so hard to do, especially when we're in a hard season, but it's important to do because it has a lot of value.
Various public figures attribute a portion of their success to input of their mentors. Which individual would you say was the most influential in making you the woman you are today?
Yeah, without a doubt, that's my mom. I don't even have to think about that question. Yeah, my mom is definitely, she inspires me in so many ways that she doesn't even know on a daily basis. She completely supports every single thing I do in my life. I'm getting emotional about it, but she really is somebody that means so much to me because she really has been there for me in ways that she didn't even know she was being there for me in that current moment. And I think that that's something that's so important. And I've talked a lot about this with my friends too, because they're like, we're so sorry we weren't there for you during that time. And I'm like, of course you were. You just didn't know it. Like, you were still there for me. And that's something that has so much value because we don't realize like the impact we're having on people's lives in the current moment until like later. And like, we did that thing for you. We didn't even know. Like, we didn't know. And that's the coolest part. And I think that that's something that's really special about my relationship with my mom is it's grown so much over my life. And she's played so many different parts in my life. And each one of them has had so much value at that time. And it keeps changing and our relationship keeps changing and evolving. And I think it's something that I'm just so endlessly grateful for. Like, I could never express in words how appreciative I truly am, because it's something that I didn't have to really look outward to find. Like, it was just, I was lucky. It was a built-in. Like, I just had that person from day one, and that's something that I definitely hold high appreciation for.
That's amazing. So what are your next goals?
Yeah, so nursing school, of course. I would like to become a pediatric nurse. Still figuring out exactly where, but I do love the kiddos. So I'm definitely going to want to work with those kiddos. And then eventually I would also like to get my master's in mental health counseling, because I love being there for people. I love being that voice of empowerment for them. And that's something that I really want to lean further into later in my life. And that's something that I feel like is also something I was called to do. Like, and that's something that's hard sometimes because you feel like it has to be this one solution for everything. Mm-hmm. And like, it doesn't have to be. Like, your physical job isn't what's fulfilling you, that's okay. Like, that's okay. You find something that does. So I know that I've been called to be a nurse and to help and to heal, but I also want to be that voice of empowerment for people. And I feel that the best way that I can do that is by becoming a mental health counselor as well. Okay. So it's going to be a long journey, but life is always a long journey, and things along the way. So that's definitely another goal of mine as well.
You can accomplish anything you set your mind to, so keep going. So please let everyone know how they can purchase your book and how they can connect with you.
Yeah, my book is available on Amazon. It is available right now in both the paperback form. So this is the paperback form, and then also it'll be available. It's available also in the hardcover, and it's going to be available in the audiobook form, which I have been recording for a couple of months now, about 3 months now. It's been a long process, just like everything with this book has. Pretty much everything in my life has been. And it's something that I feel like is going to give this new voice to my book, because reading it in my writing voice obviously has huge value, but reading it in my physical voice, when my whole heart and soul went into recording this book, and all of the emotions and all of the things that I was feeling when I wrote it, I also felt when I recorded it. And I hope that really comes through in that recording. I just actually submitted it for approval on Friday, so it should be up in the next 3 to 30 days, depending on how long Amazon takes to approve it. So it should be out there soon, and I'm excited to share it with the world.
Yay, congratulations. Please give everybody your Instagram handle.
Yeah, so I believe it's actually underneath me as well, but it's just my name. So it's just Serena Pergola. Also on Facebook, I'm Serena Pergola. Pretty much everywhere you find me, it's just my name. Nice and straightforward.
Thank you so much for coming on the Release Show to share your story. And I look forward to seeing more of your inspiring work in the future. Thank you guys for tuning into the Release Show. See you next time.
Thank you so much. Bye.
You're welcome.